Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This is going to be my first official hurricane season forecast for early April. Now, I'll have a couple more up until the start of the hurricane season, and then of course I'll have some during the hurricane season. But in this video, I'm going to be going more straight to the point. I'm not going to be using climatology models in this video as we are very close and the climatology models haven't changed. And so I'm not going to really be talking about shear. Those were in mainly my previous videos. Today I'm going to be more talking about analogs and more new information. So without further ado, let's get started. So sorry for the long intro, but anyway, it's sea surface temperatures, kind of cold, of course, across the Atlantic right now. We have some warmer ones, of course, in the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, around 27 degrees Celsius, 26 degrees Celsius, and the Northern Gulf, 21 degrees Celsius. And now in the Atlantic, we have low 20s to mid-20s, and up in the subtropical regions, we have the mid to high 10s. Of course, no systems are going to come off the Atlantic right now. So, of course, we're not going to worry about any upcoming tropical systems. None are being shown in the models, of course. And it's a little uncertain if we'll see an early season storm or not. That's kind of hard to predict. So, yeah. But nothing right now, of course. And, of course, right now we have around, that'll take us into ENSO, where we have around sea surface temperatures warmer in the Eastern Pacific, of course. And so went way positive. It's still in the negatives, but it went up a lot closer to the neutral and El Nino marks. So, yeah. And by neutral, I mean exact neutral. We are currently in a neutral. And, of course, we have a little bit cooler waters in the Caribbean right now. And in the Gulf of Mexico, we have much warmer temperatures. That'll take us more into ENSO, where it's negative 0.149. We were about to go into positive neutrals, but it kind of stopped, and now it's just hovering around the area, but I'm pretty sure we go up soon. Now, neutrals can go either way, but of course I'm not expecting us to stay in a neutral. We will probably get out of neutral before we go into the hurricane season. So, yeah. But, of course, we saw, like, January, we're at, like, negative 1.10, negative 1.15, and then it started going way up. Well, it started to go up around late January, early February, and then had a huge jump in late February. And then past that, yeah, we went into neutral, and soon enough we'll go into the positive neutral, which is any neutral value above 0.0, and then eventually into an El Nino. Now, based on the newest probabilities, mid-March are the newest ones. I think it's the second Thursday or the first Thursday that the April ones come out, and there's multiple ones. But we'll see, I guess, because I don't have it at the top of my head. But anyway, and we're currently in neutral, of course. M stands for March, April, May. We're going to go with our first months, the first letter, so M, March. So, yeah, we're currently in, of course, like an above 95% chance of a neutral and a below 5% chance of La Nina and El Nino. And by May, we're expected to be a near equal chances, but by June, we're very likely above around 65% chances of being in an El Nino by the beginning of the hurricane season, and then that's likely to stick throughout the whole hurricane season. So, of course, this will definitely affect the activity in the Atlantic, which we will get to later in the video. But yeah, these are the exact models. We see none of them stay, so we're currently in a neutral, and none of them go back into a La Nina. I mean, the very bottom one, that light blue one, which is the Syntex F, that goes maybe to the borderline, but that's it. And of course, that's an outlier. We see the CPC console goes up and stays in a positive neutral for the hurricane season. Dynamical average goes almost to positive 1, which is around a moderate El Nino, and then dynamical average. Oh, no, sorry. Statistical average goes to 0.5, so around a little bit above, so around a very weak El Nino, but an El Nino nonetheless. And then the dynamical average goes around to 1, which is a moderate El Nino. Sorry about that. But yeah, definitely showing some high chances of an El Nino during the whole hurricane season. We see most of the models agree, and actually a lot of the models are around and actually above the dynamical average. But yeah, we'll see. And anyway, now we're going to go to the analogs. This is the best analog chart I could find on Tropical Tidbits. So yeah, we see above average chances. We see for the Florida Panhandle and Florida Big Bend, the Carolinas. We see a lot for Cuba, especially north of the Bahamas and the MDR, out to sea systems, Bermuda, and even the Mid-Atlantic. So based on this, we could be seeing more systems in the Carolinas, Florida Panhandle and Big Bend, Bermuda, Cuba. Now, we see a below average for much of the Florida East Coast and Florida Peninsula. Now, the difference between this hurricane season is, of course, I'm not talking about the Bermuda High because that's really changed. And today I'm getting more straight to the point, activity-wise, with new information. But basically, the difference is that if a system goes through the Bahamas, any trough would likely push it into the Florida East Coast this time instead of going out to sea, or it would go much closer to where it affect the Florida East Coast, Florida Peninsula a lot. So they're definitely at a higher risk than these analogs might suggest. And by the way, I'm not going to show any official forecasts from AccuWeather or any other official news sources, because of course this is mine. If you haven't seen those, I suggest you go to their websites and see what you think of them. But of course, it's my forecast, so I'm not gonna go into depth of those. But nonetheless, mine is definitely somewhat similar to theirs, as there is somewhat high confidence in some parts of the forecast, but not all. Of course, we're still around a little under 2 months, so definitely take this with a grain of salt. But of course, do not use me as your official weather source. But anyway, moving on. We do see that we're going to go into analogs now. Also, sorry for that explanation there. I just want to let you guys know about that. Just to keep you guys aware. Moving on, sorry. We do see the 2006 hurricane season. So, we had one in southern Florida, East Coast, a tropical storm there. A tropical storm in the Florida Big Bend / Panhandle region. And of course, that southern Florida one went into the Carolinas, one off the coast of the Mid-Atlantic, and that went into Canada, Nova Scotia area. We had hurricanes out to sea near Bermuda, and a brief hurricane in the Dominican Republic area. So and quite a few subtropical storms went to Europe. So we could definitely be seeing, based on this analog, more subtropical and fish storm activity. But this does outline the area of the Florida Peninsula, the Carolinas, and the Florida Big Bend / Panhandle region being the main risks. Of course, not exactly in that order, but yeah, we'll see. And now we have the 2018 hurricane season, where we have systems like Hurricane Florence, which devastated the Carolinas, mainly North Carolina. We have Hurricane Michael, which was a Category 5 landfall in the Florida Panhandle, absolutely devastated it, and its effects spread wide. And then when it became a tropical depression, it was still causing damage. And now, I'm not saying we're going to see something like that. Of course, 2018 was definitely more active than expected, and we could be seeing weaker landfalls this year, which I'll get to later, but definitely, if there is a major hurricane, Hurricane Michael is definitely a good analog to show where we could see a major hurricane landfall. So yeah, many fish storms and not that much Caribbean activity. Let me go back, and not that much Western Gulf activity. Now we're going to go into the 2012 season, where the analog here is really Hurricane Sandy, which definitely could give more activity to the Mid-Atlantic. But other than that, the system isn't very good analog. We see more Yucatan activity and Central Gulf activity, which we definitely could see that, but I'm not really thinking that. Doesn't seem like it. But definitely a lot of fish storm activity and subtropical region activity, even one that went to Portugal and Spain, which definitely could be a threat to those regions. And finally, 1972. And 1972 is a very unusual season because there was 9 named storms, but there were, in addition to the 9 named storms, there was 12 tropical depressions that never became named storms. And we could be seeing weaker storms. So if we do go with the 1972 analog, of course, we'll still have named storm landfalls. Of course, we see here we had a Category 1 tropical storm effect in between Panama City and Apalachicola, which of course, I'm guessing those hurricane effects still spread wide. Wind field, so that's bad enough. And then we have a tropical storm near the Carolinas, and then, of course, that hurricane in the Florida Panhandle. But other than that, we see a tropical depression in Florida, 2 tropical depressions in Florida, a tropical depression in Georgia and the Carolinas, and many tropical depressions out to sea. So this could mean that we could see tropical. If I was saying tropical storm, I mean tropical depression. Though we did have some tropical storms make landfall. And then, of course, that hurricane I said. But we could have many tropical depression landfalls that do not become tropical storms. Now, if that were to happen, of course, you're not going to get a name storm. You're not going to get a tropical storm warning. But you're still likely going to get effects. We could still have closures in that situation. Actually, you will still have closures in that situation. Because tropical depressions are still bad. Rain, wind, all that stuff. So we could be seeing a lot of tropical depression landfalls, too, based on this. Now, most of these tropical depressions did not hit land, and I'm not expecting it to be like 1972, where there was tons of tropical depressions that didn't become tropical storms. Because that usually just doesn't happen. Usually, if you have a tropical depression, it's most likely going to become a tropical storm. So, based on this analog, we could have some tropical depressions that don't become tropical storms, or some tropical depressions that make landfall and don't become tropical storms at landfall. But still, those are still threats and still something to watch. And if you're like a tropical cyclone enthusiast like me, and you want a tropical cyclone, a tropical depression would probably still do you good if you wanted that. But of course, we don't want damage, which is the downside of these tropical cyclones. Now, enough of that season. It was just very unusual. But of course, definitely not out of the picture. It's a good analog of what we can see. But anyway, the last time I did this, I put around a 50% chance of a neutral, a 40% or a 30% chance of El Nino, and a 10 to 20% chance of La Nina. Those when it was still at around a -1, and it seemed like it was stalling. But of course, it went way up, so now we're going to go with a 0% chance of La Nina. That's why you don't see it here. We can pretty much rule it out. It's less than a 1% chance. No need of putting it on here. It's an extreme low chance. A 20% chance of a neutral ENSO, and an 80% chance of a El Nino at some point in the hurricane season, possibly the whole hurricane season based on probabilities. Now, this is activity. Of course, we have slightly above average probabilities in the Northern Caribbean based on those analogs, and into possibly the Central Gulf, but that's definitely not the main regions. We see mostly out to sea storms, like a little bit east of Bermuda, and of course into that subtropical region. And then once it becomes extratropical, I'm not going to put it as a hot spot on this region, but yeah, we definitely see those purples. And then for landfalls, we see red for the Mid-Atlantic. Of course, the Mid-Atlantic, it's kind of north, so it's kind of hard to get systems up there. But, of course, our Hurricane Sandy analog, definitely above average risk. And then, of course, pink and purple, we do see those analogs of Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Florence, all those tropical storms and tropical depressions that hit those areas. And, of course, I'm not showing the Bermuda High, but it's definitely stronger than usual. And troughs and main formation areas are definitely in favor of, mainly in favor of these systems hitting land and align with these landfall areas. And by the way, main formation areas, this also signals main formation areas. So you see those reds. So, like, for example, the MDR, the fish storms. At the very right, on the beginning of that red area, that's likely where MDR fish storms are going to form. In Leeward Islands, that's likely where central Gulf systems are going to form. And around the Yucatan to the Bahamas, that's likely where United States systems are going to form, though they also likely could form in the northern main development region if a trough or a strong Bermuda High at the right time of the year can keep them south. And also, guys, moving on from that, here's my official forecast. Of course, many tropical depressions possible based on those analogs that don't become tropical storms. But I'm expecting an average to above average season, 13 to 16 named storms, 5 to 9 hurricanes, and 2 to 3 major hurricanes with a 50% chance of below average season, a 40% chance of an average season, and a 10% chance of an above average season. And of course, these numbers are going to change over time. And key points are more fish storms, average amount of landfalls. I'm expecting around 3 landfalls, which is around the average, or 3 to 4 at least. The Florida East Coast, the Florida Panhandle, / Big Bend, and the Carolinas and Bahamas will be the main risk areas, especially those first 3, which are the Florida East Coast, the Florida Panhandle, Big Bend, and the Carolinas. There could be many weaker landfalls and definitely a below average to average